Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cicchetti.
Be sure to check out the Green Building Matters community, where you can have unlimited exam prep for any of the professional credential exams you're tackling next, as well as putting your continuing education on autopilot, saving time with GBS reporting your hours on your behalf. Check it out, gbes.com/join. Now, enjoy this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cicchetti, and I love it because each week I get to interview a green building professional from somewhere in the world. And actually, I've got Kevin on today, and he's up in Minnesota. Actually, we've been able to grow our team in the Twin Cities way back. I worked for Opus, and I go up to Minnetonka. And man, Kevin, it'd get cold in the winter. I know you hear that a lot, and you probably don't want to hear it, but I appreciate you being with us today. We've got Kevin Bright coming to us from Rochester, Minnesota. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate it.
Well, eager to hear more about your story and how you got to where you are today as the Director of Energy and Sustainability, where you're working. But take us back first. Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up outside of Boston in Massachusetts in a small town called Sharon, Massachusetts. So that was my hometown. And then from there, I ended up going to school at a small college called Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont. And I also then went to graduate school at Boston University. So I have a graduate degree in energy and environmental analysis.
That's awesome. I did some of that time in Vermont there. I have some influence on you. It's a beautiful part of the country. I understand your undergrad was in geology too. So tell us about that time and your decision-making there with your classes and maybe a little nature too.
Sure. Yeah, my undergraduate degree, you're spot on, is in environmental geology. And yeah, Middlebury and Vermont is a really beautiful place. So if you haven't had a chance to visit, I would highly recommend it. But it had a huge influence on me as a choice for college. They also have a very strong environmental studies program. Coming out of high school, I knew that was something I wanted to learn more about and major in. I just didn't know exactly kind of what focus area it would take, and ended up, after a few classes in chemistry and biology, kind of focusing on environmental geology. And I think my passion for it grew, especially my senior year. I got to work on a thesis project where the focus of that was to test for arsenic levels in people's homes that had private wells, and better understand where arsenic was prevalent, where it was coming from. I didn't have any causation findings, but there was definitely some correlation between some rock outcrops that were high in concentration arsenic and the homes that were being pretty heavily impacted in their water source or had high concentrations of arsenic too. So it was kind of my first experience in environmental health too.
Kind of like Aaron Brockovich there, man. I mean, it's something
a little bit.
Cool. That's really cool. And then you decided to go back and get an advanced degree, a master's. So what changed? And you're like, okay, I got that side of environmental, but how about we take it a little further? So what was happening around the time there?
Sure. So I had done a few internships as part of my college experience. I interned with a nature conservancy for a summer. My brother happens to work for an environmental consulting firm that cleans up radioactive sites across the country. Oh, wow. So I had some experience with that. And I was debating after graduating in between a profession in renewable energy development and one more focused on demand side conservation. And I ended up going to graduate school to figure it out. And I wouldn't really recommend that as a pathway to others who are thinking about it because it's kind of an expensive way to make a decision. Okay. But I think it led me to a really good place. So I can't really complain about it too much.
Here you are as a green building guru. So, okay. And then, so you get that degree, you stick around Boston. Tell us about your time there at Harvard and facilities and just how that green building career really get launched from there.
Yeah, I was really fortunate coming out of graduate school to be offered a position at Harvard in their sustainability office, which then became the Green Building Services office there. At the time, Harvard was kind of a leader in sustainability in higher education. They had a program in existence for about 4 or 5 years. So I got to just be looped in with a team that was really passionate about implementing sustainability actions and behaviors at the college, the university, but then also apply to green buildings. So it's really just a period of like pretty amazing learning for me, surrounded by people that were passionate, like I said, about sustainability, and I was able to learn a lot from. So I was able to be there for 6 years, but it was probably the most impactful part of my professional life so far.
It's awesome. Okay, so anywhere along the way there, was there like an aha, though, it's going to be green buildings? I mean, like, can you trace that back a little bit for us?
Yeah, in graduate school, I got looped in to a project at Boston University where they were looking at calculating their carbon footprint, and they were looking for graduate student help. So again, I kind of fell backwards into a project that ended up kind of charting a life course for me a little bit. But part of the project was like helping this group within Boston University understand which buildings were consuming the most energy and where strategically should they start some energy evaluations. So my degree is like statistics and mapping based. So I put together a campus map for them, took all their utility bills over a period of years and started mapping out visually where a lot of their energy consumption was coming from to then help them kind of set out a path of how to address that over the long term. And it was really that experience where just things started lining up for me. It was just like understanding that this is really helpful information. It's a way that people can better understand what's happening in their buildings. And there's a lot of wins that come out of that. And mostly financial savings, or a big piece of it are financial savings. So that was really resonated with me because there's something in it for everybody.
That's a pretty comprehensive study. You did the whole campus, the buildings, kind of a heat map. That's good. Well, who else maybe had some influence on you as you were building this green building career? You even mentioned your brother and some of his environmental work there, but who else had some influence on you?
Yeah, my brother was helpful in helping me figure out that environmental consulting job probably wasn't something that I was too interested in, though I'm very proud of him and the work that he does. But at Harvard, I think there's probably 3 key people that had a really big influence on me. Nathan Gauthier, who was kind of the director for Green Building Services at the time. Andrea Trimble, who was kind of my immediate boss and gave me a lot of opportunity to learn new things and create some new opportunities within our consulting service to explore and lead. So she gave me a lot of responsibility, which I'm super grateful for. And then Kevin Sheehan would be the third. He was a facilities person that I was partnered with to create Harvard's energy auditing service. And Kevin had owned a HVAC service, design service, and kind of maintenance service for a long time outside of Boston, and then ended up working at Harvard as within their facilities maintenance operations. So basically, a lot of my understanding of building systems, mechanical, electrical, otherwise, really stems from working with him on a daily basis on identifying ways to reduce energy consumption in buildings at Harvard. So probably those 3, I would say, have the biggest influence on me.
It's good to give those mentors a shout out. This those that have had influence, open some doors for us. I love it. Okay, so connect some more of the dots there, that green building career in Harvard and maybe even another firm or two. But then also, how'd you get to Minnesota?
It's a good question. My partner I met at Middlebury, and I think when I was trying to convince her to like me, I promised I would move to Minnesota at some point. So now here I am living up to my promises, which is great. But between Boston and Minnesota, I had a stop in Maine too. I worked at Colby College and filled a position there to create their first sustainability office and be their first sustainability hire. So it was a great opportunity to kind of take all the things that I had learned at Harvard and kind of create something from scratch, which was really exciting.
That's awesome, man. Well, you know Asa on my team, and I don't know if he's told you, he has a similar story there to follow his now wife to Minnesota. So make sure you guys connect on that. He's been on the podcast. Nathan, who you mentioned, has been on the podcast. So excited here to learn more about your story. Well, tell us what's keeping you busy today, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I have a role now with the city of Rochester and this economic development project called Destination Medical Center that's focused on kind of partnering or marrying Mayo Clinic's growth plans in Rochester, Minnesota, where their headquarters are now, with some city building efforts on ways that we can help address and promote more of an urbanist feel in the downtown by encouraging private development, but also complementing it with public infrastructure in a sustainable way. So my job is to kind of help lead the city's efforts towards sustainability and their sustainability programs that they're looking to grow, but also integrate sustainability deeply in the public infrastructure projects that are associated with this economic development work and influence the private development that's happening in Rochester to be more sustainable. So it's interesting. A lot going on, a lot of projects happening, which is really exciting. and a good opportunity, again, to learn almost on a daily basis about different applications of sustainability, sustainable design, and also equity in the work that I get to do.
Yeah, the equity is so important. And in a minute, we'll talk healthy buildings, but almost 4 years there in Rochester. And so 2 follow-up questions there. One is, tell us some more about that title, Director of Energy and Sustainability. So where do you see them coming together? Where are they different? Is one more important than the other? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It is kind of a funny title when I saw it, because I, up to this point in this position, had always kind of viewed them as one and the same, and that minimizing the amount of energy, but also developing renewable sources ultimately lead to sustainable outcomes. But at the same time, I think it is an apt title as well, because a good part of my job and one project I'm working on now is probably a good example in the development of a district energy system within the downtown of the city, and trying to see if we can make that work, both to serve some government buildings that are in need of a new heating and cooling source, and also size it appropriately so we can accommodate private development in the adjacent areas too, because there's a lot of opportunity for development in that area as well. So I think part of the focus was some energy engineering chops, or at least understanding, to help identify these possibilities that might come up. And the sustainability aspect, because it also translates to transportation needs, affordable housing and equity needs, ways that people can access different services that they need, but also food access and other kind of pretty interesting topics that were part of the work that I'd done in the past, but not nearly as focused on it. So it's exciting for me, because there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of learning opportunities that I didn't really get a chance to focus on as much at Harvard or at Colby.
Yeah, I agree. Just that evolution from energy savings, where are we at, benchmark, what else can we do to sustainability, maybe some certifications like LEED. Okay, now we're getting into embodied carbon, we're getting into healthy buildings. But yeah, you're right. Those two, they go hand in hand, and energy first a lot of the time. Well, my next question is geography. For those that are listening, we actually have some, Kevin, listening from around the world that maybe haven't been to Minnesota. Tell us about the state of Minnesota. We got the Twin Cities, right? Minneapolis, St. Paul. You're down kind of southeast, right? In Rochester. You mentioned the work that the Mayo Clinic does. We know the Well Living Lab there and the whole healthy building movement. So tell us a little more about, there's some large companies based in Minnesota. What do we need to know about Minnesota?
I don't know. It's, again, an interesting question, because I don't consider myself an expert by any means on things Minnesota. But yeah, there are presence of some pretty large companies. Best Buy, Mayo Clinic, other kind of health device technologies are based here, which is pretty exciting. So there's just kind of a
3M, Target, right?
3M, Target. Yeah, there you go. You're doing a good job. And I think in moving here, what I was most impressed by was just the collaborative approach to sustainability, in that there are those private companies that were just mentioned, share a lot of best practices, ways they approach issues and topics, but it also translates to the city and municipality side, which is really exciting, right? I mean, that's where you start to see momentum starting to build. And really great outcomes kind of carrying over from one place to another, and then things happening that you're not even aware of, that from a sustainability kind of environmentalist perspective is super exciting. Because when you're not in the room and discussions are happening about sustainability, that's when you're starting to really make an impact, and exciting projects, exciting initiatives are starting to come out of it. So I don't know. I guess the one thing I've been most impressed by, as I said, is the collaboration and the willingness to collaborate. Not something that I was missing, I guess, from Maine or in Boston, but it is a next level kind of opportunity here, and willingness to do so here in Minnesota, which is pretty awesome.
Good stuff, man. Thanks. That went a little off script with the geography question, but you did well with it. So I like to give my podcast guests permission to look back on the highlight reel. So what stands out when you look back? What are you really proud of?
Yeah, I guess in thinking about this question, one thing that I'm particularly proud of is just I've been afforded the ability to kind of teach in the past and here in Rochester. And that's probably the most gratifying part of my job, or what I've kind of characterized my job as. Particularly at Colby and at Harvard, I got to participate in some green building design courses for undergraduate and graduate students. And I don't think, or at the time, there's a definite need for it, and that students were very interested in the concept of sustainability, but not totally knowledgeable about how it's actually applied within an organization or an institution like Harvard or at Colby. So it was fun for me to be able to just create a course at Colby that focused on this is how you integrate sustainability into landscape design. This is what an efficient water system looks like. This is how you should approach HVAC design and some of the analyses that can help contribute or point you towards more efficient outcomes. And from that, especially at the teaching at Colby, a number of the students that I taught now have pursued careers in sustainability. So I think that's been pretty gratifying for me to see from afar, is just the transition from a really curious student to now devoting their time and expertise to kind of advancing sustainable outcomes elsewhere too.
It's awesome to teach, and I'll go ahead and tell you what I tell you when we get off the podcast. And I want everybody to hear this. If you're a guest on my Green Building Matters podcast, you get a t-shirt that says, "Teach everything you know." That's our motto here at the podcast. So I can
really
tell
like that.
You're really having fun with that, man. Teach everything you know. So what else? I mean, you're a LEED fellow. That's pretty epic. What does that mean to you? How did that come about?
I mean, in thinking back about it, it is pretty amazing. And I think it really just speaks back to the great mentors that I had at the early stage of my career, the faith they put in me to learn new things and kind of create things from scratch, and giving the support I needed to do that. But then I've been pretty fortunate in my professional career too. Like, people have put trust in me at Harvard, at Colby, and now here in Rochester to guide and lead programs focused on sustainability and lead these different organizations toward the pretty ambitious goals that they have to advance both sustainability, environmental outcomes, but also now equity outcomes too. So I'm just pretty grateful, I guess. If there's one thing I'd had to point to, it's just like I've had a lot of support from a lot of people to get me where I am. And that's important in anybody's life, I think, are kind of the chances that are taken on people, myself included, to take things on. And without that, I don't think a LEED fellow would be possible, or would I be talking to you today, Charlie? But I'm extremely grateful for those people that did put their trust in me to carry these things out.
No, that's good, man. I do interview a lot of LEED fellows, but just anyone that's just making change in this green building movement, I want to have them on here so they can use this as a megaphone to tell their story and encourage someone. Because if you're listening right now and you've been a loyal podcast listener, first, thank you. We're actually over 150 interviews now, but I want you to know you can be the next Charlie. You can be the next Kevin. Like, that's what this is all about, right? So my next question is, well, actually, I need to ask you about projects. So asking someone what are one or two of their favorite projects, like asking someone who's their favorite child or who's their favorite dog. But are there one or two projects that, man, these were fun? There's something unique on these projects.
Yeah, I was thinking about one that we're working on right now in Rochester is the creation of our community's first sustainability and resiliency plan. So it's under the leadership of our mayor, who's a champion for sustainability. So it's kind of under the guidance of her leadership that put together a task force. And what we set out to do in the creation of this task force was ensure that it had a diverse representation of our community. And in fact, we even kind of tried to ensure that we had more representation from the communities here in Rochester that were likely to be most heavily impacted by the impacts of climate change moving forward. And the communities that we didn't have represented, we made sure that we set up community listening sessions with them to get their lived experience to help inform and create the best plan we possibly could. So that's been, again, a really gratifying and eye-opening experience. And that, speaking to kind of the equity elements that I've referenced already, Charlie, that we all lead very different lives, and communities are being disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate change as we speak. And unless we integrate these voices, this lived experience, into our future planning efforts, we're going to miss the boat. We're not going to hit the mark that we're seeking, and we're just kind of further inequities that exist today. So I'm really excited about this project. We're starting to land the plane a little bit about what are the actual strategies and actions that we're going to take as a community to help advance and make our community more resilient, but also more equitable. And it's really exciting. So pretty fortunate, again, to work on the project. But so far, it's headed in a great direction.
Love it, man. And with that more work to do on the equity side, that's kind of a good segue to what's next. What's around the corner? What should we be reading up on now? If someone's listening to this podcast, what are you predicting? I mean, is it healthy buildings? Is it embodied carbon? Is it equity? Is it what else are you really spending some time on?
I think for me personally, it's been both understanding and developing my own learning around the issues of white supremacy and racial inequities, but then seeing how I can be a leader in the community here to be an ally to fight it and be anti-racist in the kind of the work that I do, but ensuring that the programs, initiatives that I'm running are as equitable as they possibly can be. And if they're not, figuring out how I can work with the communities that are asking, or the ones that maybe don't have a voice and reaching out to them and meeting them where they are in order to help guide them in a better direction and make them the best that they can be. So that's been a huge learning opportunity for me here, and probably one that I see more work, especially on the municipality side as it relates to sustainability, only going to continue and grow, which I'm pretty excited about.
It's awesome, man. It's good you're spending time there. And, is there anything you'd recommend? A little bit I ask about books, but, I've in the last couple of years, I've read like White Fragility and some other books, tools. I don't know. Is there anything that you're spending a little more time? Is there a certain website or a certain place someone that's listening could go read up and get a little more educated here?
Yeah. On the topic of kind of racial equity, there's a couple of books that come to mind. One is So You Want to Talk About Race, I found as kind of just like a good first step if someone's looking to learn more about the topic and the experience of people of color. I would recommend that as a good first read. And I'm kind of in the middle now of Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which is an extremely powerful book and really gets at the lived experience, in this case of a Black person growing up in Baltimore, and the various ways that how he's growing up really haven't changed all that much. It's really a book to his son, talking about his experience growing up in Baltimore, how things haven't changed in some ways, how things have improved in others. But as a father too, it's really resonates. So if folks haven't read that one, I've been pretty blown away thus far, about halfway through it.
And yeah, because I love to put links to some book suggestions. That's good stuff. Anything else with the green building movement, the healthy building movement that you really see taking off?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the tagline for the Destination Medical Project that I'm also sustainability director for is to create America's city for health. So a lot of the infrastructure projects that we've been working on have really kind of zeroed in on how can we improve health equity here in our community. I think when people think about health, they automatically go to like eating better food and exercising and maybe taking the stairs instead of elevator. And all those things are super important, are great sound strategies for green building as well. And part of the job now and the discussion we're having in the community is how do we start taking those same strategies and implementing them across the community at a grand scale, so that I don't think the principles change at all, right? Like you're still trying to get people to be active. You're trying to place things close by each other. So there's a walkability aspect. And then is it safe to walk? Are there areas to walk? Are there areas to bike and move around safely? Are we promoting clean energy sources and transportation sources that are running off renewable electricity? Like, are we just making people's lives easier and giving them access to these services and pieces of infrastructure that can help improve their lives? And a lot of this comes from LEED, right? Or the USGBC, I think, was a leader in this in a lot of ways of creating a certification system that said, like, this is a standard or the base level of things that should be integrated in a building. And a lot of those same strategies are the things that you're using to build cities, build communities, to be healthier places too. So that's a pretty exciting part of my work and part of the project. It has led to some pretty interesting discussions with the community about how we can go about doing that.
Yeah, I can tell you're passionate about all things community, humanity, man. You seem like a pretty cool guy here. Let's learn a little more about you. A few rapid fire questions. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
I don't know. I think my gift is like I have a good base of technical skills, but I'm also have the ability to kind of work with people pretty well. Everyone has a parent, I think, that probably says nice things to them. My mom said, Kevin, use your powers for good, not for evil. And I think the power she was referencing was my ability to kind of read people and kind of what they're thinking and how they're responding to things I'm saying in real time. And I think that suited me pretty well. So the combination of like knowing the subject, knowing the topic, knowing what will advance outcomes, but then also being able to relate to people that I'm working with and kind of marrying those two the best I can has led to some good opportunities for me.
It's like that emotional intelligence, really connecting, understanding people. That's good. Do you have any good habits, any routines or rituals you could share?
I don't know. The two that I kind of rely on, and especially lately since we've all been kind of cooped up in our homes for a while, is exercise and playing music. So I try to exercise every day, and I grew up playing the drums. I have 2 young kids, so playing the drums isn't really that easy to do anymore, to create a bunch of noise, especially after they go to sleep. So this past year, I've been learning the bass guitar, and that's been kind of a good outlet to kind of use that part of my brain as well and relax.
My 12-year-old son, my oldest son, Blake, he plays the drums, and He's got an electric kit and he's got an acoustic kit, but man, sometimes he'll be rattling the whole house. But hey, you want him to have that creative outlet. So
yeah, it's fun.
Okay, so bucket list. Kevin, as you and I get to know each other, I'm actually a fan of a bucket list. What are one or two items maybe on your bucket list? Any adventure, travel? You want to write a book? I don't know. What's on the bucket list?
Yeah, the one I wrote down is kind of still associated with my family a little bit, but providing opportunities for my kids to see and develop an understanding of the world, both kind of like an appreciation of the beauty of it, the creativity that is contained within humans, but also other species, as well as like the tough parts, right? So just trying to build an awareness of what's going well and what's not going well so that they can be good global citizens and address probably some pretty tough challenges that lie ahead for them as well. So travel would be a huge part of that, right? Of just seeing different cultures and differences.
Unpack that a little bit. I'm a dad. I love being a dad. I can tell you do too. One of my other Minnesota colleagues, Christina Bach, who is also on the podcast, actually, when she was growing up, her family took the whole family overseas to live for a year. And it's like, wow, really immersion. So, there's just travel, sharing the cultures. I don't know. What do you think are a few tactical moves you might do as your kids get older?
Yeah, we're trying a few things now. Just things that maybe I didn't do as much as that when I was a kid that I now have kind of grown a fondness for as I've gotten a little bit older. So like rock climbing is something that we've been kind of teasing a little bit and working with. We're planning a big road trip this summer. We tried to do it this past summer, but COVID kind of impacted that a little bit. So a 2-week trip where we all just kind of pile into a car and go camping at a bunch of national parks, but also some international travel. So before we had kids, my partner and I, Christine, spent a decent amount of time in Vietnam and went to Patagonia, traveled to Puerto Rico a number of times, places in Europe. So interested in global travel just because I find it fascinating and both the natural beauty, like I said, but also just understanding how people live across the world and developing an appreciation for that. And I think that's super important for kids to just know that we have a lot of similarities and we have some differences, but I think there's a lot more similarities in ways that we're human than we're not. So hoping to kind of cultivate that through travel a little bit. And I think it's an important thing to do to help cultivate that.
Dude, I love it. That's good stuff. Yeah. It's, it's through experience and seeing, right? It's good. Books, we talked about some earlier, but are there any other books you might recommend?
The other one I'm thinking of is more of like a mindfulness book that I've gotten into a little bit lately. I'm about halfway through this one, so I have like 2 half-finished books. But this one is The Road Less Traveled, and it is kind of an introspection book on what things probably should be most important, how to cultivate relationships, how to be easy on yourself, and not beat yourself up when things don't go well, especially things that are outside of your control, really. So I don't know, for folks that are interested in kind of taking that leap, I found that super helpful too, especially just given that it is kind of a stressful job that I have, as I imagine others are experiencing right now, and a good way to kind of just help reframe what's important on a daily basis.
And we're still in the middle of this pandemic, everything's just a little heavier, more tense. So it's good to know there's a book like that can teach you how to give yourself a little more grace. Yeah, it's good. So we'll put links to the books in the podcast show notes for everybody. Well, Kevin, as we start winding down, 2 more questions. One is there anything you wish you'd known a little earlier in your career?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this question. I guess there wasn't anything necessarily that I wish I had known, but like skills that I cultivated, especially like I wish someone had just told me on day one. And these were like, 1, be curious. And that I share with the students too that were at the colleges that I worked at. Of if there's something you don't know, like the internet's a wonderful place. And if there's something you don't know how to evaluate, there are tools about sustainable design that are for free that you can just download right now and try to answer the question. So a lot of the kind of exercises I had in the courses I taught are, well, wherever you live, tell me where the best place to plant this tree is. And there's a tool online, iTree, that can help you figure that out. You can zoom in on your house, wherever you live, and it'll help identify exactly where that tree should go. Like, a lot of these questions, right? And that curiosity is just taking that next step. Like, oh, I'm wondering about this. Now what can I do about it? Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
I was just saying, I just learned something. I'm pulling up the website now. That's amazing. You're right. I think what I heard you say is stay curious, huh?
For sure. So that would be my first one. And then if there are things you don't know or Google can't help you out with, then ask questions. And there are times when maybe asking a question in a big meeting might not be the best thing to do, but pulling a person aside after a meeting or following up with them afterwards and just trying to clarify something that you don't quite understand or things that you're seeking more information on. It kind of falls in that be curious too, but don't be shy. I mean, no one, especially folks in the sustainability world, I think it's a pretty tight-knit group and folks are really willing and interested in helping each other. To your point, Charlie, like a lot of people reach out to me and I'm trying to be as gracious with my time as possible, knowing that when I was just starting, many people were gracious with their time to get me to where I'm at. So to pay it forward, and I think a lot of people are interested in doing it, especially in this work. So if anyone comes up to me and asks a question, I'm pretty responsive or try to be the best I can. But I would encourage other folks to ask questions as well, because it helps settle things down in your head, but also makes you a better employee and helps, right, just be, again, kind of a good global citizen. Now you're just developing an understanding of the world and how it works.
Simple and profound nuggets there. Those are good. Well, my last question, let's say there's someone listening right now that is just now jumping into the green building movement. What words of encouragement do you have for them?
It's awesome. Highly recommend. I find myself incredibly fortunate to be able to work full-time on something that I feel passionate about. And I imagine listeners out there feel the same way. They care about the environment. They care about the natural world. They want to see it preserved. And if it is a passion, then find people that have taken a pathway and have a job that you're seeking and set up an informational interview. And by that, I mean, just ask them how they got to where they were. Find out about the story, exactly like what we're doing right now, Charlie, because it's these pathways that I think the more people that know about it, the more people are going to be working in this area and the better world we'll have for everybody. So.
Love it. It's awesome. I echo that. Well, everybody, this has been Kevin Bright coming to us. He's the Director of Energy and Sustainability at the Destination Medical Center. I'm going to put a link. You can connect with Kevin on LinkedIn. Kevin, I enjoyed your story. You got me encouraged. Thank you for your time today.
Really appreciate it, Charlie. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.